Welcome back, friends and family. Today, on the almost daily ZenCast, return from summer hiatus. First, let's enjoy a little music to soothe the soul, because boy, howdy, are people out there running around on a hair trigger. Everybody cool your jets. This is real life, not Fortnite, not some shoot 'em up, bang 'em up video game. Life is on the line. Here's a little bit of digital robot dance music for your entertainment. Trip Hop 101 Live Remix Live. Is that a typo? Well, okay, we'll talk about it afterwards. Remix Live, mind-altering music is welcome here. A DJ Z digital asset loop-de-loop special feature. It is Tuesday, August 3rd. Apparently, time has really escaped me because it's already 1:04 p.m. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night to you, dear fellow occupants of this living womb that we oh so dismissively call planet Earth. I said living womb, as in like a uterus that is alive, not living room, as in like your collective place to leave your disastrous mess of stuff you don't pick up after yourself. This episode's opening blurb is from Inner Worlds, Outer Worlds, totally authentic, personal, direct, genuine recommendation. If you have not seen that beautifully orchestrated documentary, you're doing yourself a disservice. No one's paying me to say that, folks. Go check it out. And I quote, "The true crisis in our world is not social, political, or economic. Our crisis is a crisis of consciousness." Welcome back, dear friends and listeners. DJ Z by my side, my imaginary, I can pronounce words at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, my imaginary animatronic DJ loopifying service robot here to help me sound as if I were in some way, shape, or form musically inclined. The show has been officially on summer hiatus. And so I say to you, friends, welcome back. And I humbly thank you for your welcome me back into the inner sanctum of your mind by allowing the sound of my voice to enter the slippery tunnels of your ear holes. Here we are, friends. It's been a long, hot scorcher of a summer. Woohoo! Especially if you're anywhere in the continental Northern American quadrant. You know, just the hottest set of new temperature records in history to date. But never mind that any of the bazillions of metric tons of toxic waste that we have so gleefully poured out under the excuse and banner of progress and consumerism has anything to do with it. Nope, let's just put some blinders on. But I digress. Do not accuse me of being some globalist shill, dear friends, for as you will soon come to understand, it's not possible. But first and foremost, I want to take a moment as we kick off episode 455 to jokingly, not so jokingly, ask you, did you miss me? Because I missed you, and I noticed that some of you were listening, even though I was not actively dropping any new episodes or being on the Sprecher.com live. And to you, my dear friends, a super special thanks of honest and sincere gratitude to everybody who's been tuning in to past episodes while I have been away on a personal summer hiatus, staycation, glorious deluxe of not leaving my own house and actively producing, or rather, not actively producing content for this podcast. Your support for this silly, rough and tumble, raw and rugged around the edges show is deeply and genuinely appreciated. Yes, this show is raw and rugged around the edges. Welcome to episode 455. If I can be so bold as to borrow from the dead. Don't jump to conclusions. That's not what you might think it means, you know. And that's why I ask people to check projections at the door, please. But if I can borrow from the world phenom music group commonly referred to as the dead, what a long, strange trip it has been, dear audience. And what an even longer and even stranger trip it would appear we might have ahead of us, before us, directly in front of us, and maybe even a little bit of in between us. There is so much to talk about. There is so much to discuss. But, and I know there's always a but, and or an ampersand, and or a yes and, which is my favorite, because that, if you can yes and something, that means you're acknowledging, you're not dismissing. If you can yes, I understand what you say, and I'd like to contribute the following. Then you can really start building cohesive, collaborative public discourse that leads not to some sort of tribalistic win and chest pounding, but perhaps a nuanced elevation of communal understanding. I mean, I don't just pick these words at random because they're big and chunky. They mean things, right? Tap the mic, tap the mic. Hello? Is this thing on? I want to take a moment, dear friends, if I may, indulge in the creative license extended to me as the auteur and singular host of this show that's supposed to be hosted by two or more people And I say that not to complain, but rather just to let you know that that's like, I understand that it's not as exciting, right? I apologize. But I'm very aware of the limitations of this show. So, taken for granted. Operational assumption, one day there will be 3 of us sitting around a much more professional setup than I can afford to provide myself now. And the show will go on in a much more entertaining fashion because there'll be 3 or more voices chiming in about all these exciting things. Occasionally doing, cheeky vaudevillian silly things, and other times getting really, really, really intense. But never, ever, dear friends, either imaginarily in my mind as I visualize these things in hopes to manifest them in the future, but also in real practical terms here and now, trying to go out of our way to be rude and or downright insulting. That's my number 1 rule. And even I sometimes fail to adhere to it. But put a pin in that, for I will come around full circle and issue a public apology in just a moment. If I could, as I was begging your indulgence a moment ago, extend the theme of the last 2 episodes. Have you heard the last 2 episodes? I understand the titles were long, presumptuous at best, capricious in the middle ground, and downright, to some people's sensitive ears, offensive. How dare I suggest that somebody might not know what I'm talking about if they haven't listened to me talk for a hot minute yet. How dare I? But setting that aside, I do want to borrow from the theme, the milieu, the gestalt of those 2 episodes, if I may, and extend it a little bit into this sneaky, cheeky preview bonus. I haven't technically come back from hiatus because it's not tomorrow yet episode. That's what's going on right now. We're doing that right now. We're doing a little extra bonus episode, and I'm extending that theme that I dropped in those episodes before the summer hiatus, and indulge in sharing with you some key ideas at play in a very serious sense, and also in a very, isn't that a fun play on words to use the word play in the phrase at play? In terms of the general conceptual framework of this podcast, there are some ideas at play that are key, central pillars that I probably intended to include in the last 2 episodes, which you have hopefully indulged in listening to, and I may have failed. So, to that end, if I may interrupt myself and quickly recap those episodes to the briefest extent that I can. 1, let's leave all assumption-making, projection beaming, playground taunts, and nonsensical bullying tactics at the door. Unnecessary. We can get real AF as you want. We can speak in bold terms and use salty pirate language if you want. If you don't want to, we don't have to. I know I sure as fuck sometimes drop the F-bomb, but I don't ever say it in that aggravated assault kind of way. Sorry, I'm not accusing anybody of aggravated assault, nor am I claiming to have ever achieved. You get what I'm saying there, right? We can talk tough, but there's no need, and I will try to, and sometimes I fail. I will try to avoid this and stick to it as much as I can, and try to updraft any failures of the past, right? Okay. So that said, some of the other key conceptual ideas at play for this general conceptual framework of this podcast that I think might be fun to revisit and or sort of connect here and now to anyone listening, as we ease back into the rhythm of doing this show, hopefully a little tighter, a little faster, a little less prolongedly, derangedly rambling as I have in the past, and on an almost, if not quite actually, daily basis, which means I gotta not blow out my voice as I have before. The following statements I truly and genuinely mean quite seriously, and I hope that you will not dismiss them out of hand, dear beloved audience. Oh, I was going to recap episodes last and part 2 of last. So, leaving malarkey at the door. That was part of the opening blurb of that episode. Assumptions, projections, political, ideological, I'm here to take apart political ideology. So, if I invite you to discuss an idea, it isn't to prove that Ronald Reagan was right. And here's the reason why. I've been impartially observing political ideology of all flavors and varieties since Ronald Reagan was in office. And if I may, that clause, that operational sort of, please just keep this in mind, it's at play, also applies to conspiracy theory. I have been impartially observing and monitoring from a sort of passive, non-judgmental perspective, conspiracy theory content, basically on and off as an enthusiast, not a professional, since Reagan was in office. So my opinion on it is not to be instantly dismissed as ignorant or entirely uninformed, for that would be an absurd and silly, sorry, some people don't like being called silly, and I don't mean to trigger anybody anywhere, because I know that generally speaking, out there in the world, that's an offensive word. To me, it's not. There are other words much more offensive. But I'm aware, right? This ain't my first rodeo, has some meaning in my context. So, having said all that, I want to get to one of my first thing first. I really wanted to kick off the show with this, and now it's been 17 minutes. Dear friends, I say this to you as an olive branch of hear my truth and don't get all angry at me. Whatever I say, whatever I have said, whatever I may be about to say, whatever I may say in the not too distant future, for I most certainly intend to keep doing this podcast at least for another 5 years, just for the shits and giggles of going a full 10 to see what comes of it. Insert here a reference to the every overnight success is actually a 10-year long problem, or whatever the right wording is, but that was a random sidebar. Whatever I say, have said, will say on this show, I want to assure you, each and every single one of you, individually and collectively, as the audience of this show, that the following fundamental principles are, as far as I am concerned, are to be considered as understood, as default assumptions, operational assumptions, and in effect at all times. And the most important of which is, I know and acknowledge, and should not be dismissed for having never acknowledged, because I've said this multiple times before in the show, and I will say it multiple times again, and I'm saying it here and now, nice and loud for anybody that hasn't caught it yet. I realize, in the most painful, realistically serious way, that I could very well be wrong about absolutely anything and everything that I say. And I posit, for anyone joining in, that is in the most realist of worlds, in the most frankest of realities, there isn't anyone out there that cannot claim the same, or claim otherwise, right? Everyone must kind of agree that deep down, we all know that we might have zero clue as to what's actually going on. And we're just running with the best thing we think we've got going in terms of postulates or theories or narrative, whatever you want to call it. And I'm not speaking lightly when I say this, because as it has been pointed out to me, and as I'm sure any of the long-term supporters of the show that have been listening for more than just a hot second now, you have come to understand that I have strong opinions and I speak with confidence. To the point of sounding absurd, I am sure. And that I openly acknowledge that I have heard my own theories with a critical ear, and I have questioned my own statements and assessments, whether you've witnessed it or not. I spent a lifetime questioning and re-questioning and turning around and inside out and flipping it back on itself and throwing away and picking back up and running the gauntlet, the intellectual gauntlet of not just spoon-feeding myself something that someone spoon-fed to me. I am the opposite of anything that you could remotely call a brainwashed sheeple, despite how many people love to just pepper spray that statement around as if it weren't an insult to anybody, even someone who is a brainwashed sheeple. It's still an insult, dear friends. And we are, or are we not, above that. If we're going to take ourselves seriously, public discourse, in a sort of world debate, kind of the stage of ideas, should we stoop as low as the lowest stoop, or should we rise above even our own foibles? I ask you, and I ask that seriously. I posit, dear friends, the question is, of course, try to rise above. You will fail, as I will fail. For example, in the last 2 episodes, I quoted one of my favoriteest quotes turned into graphic meme, which is the "you don't know shit" quote. Now, when I read it as such as it very easily could be interpreted as me trying or attempting to say to the individual listener, whoever they may be, that they personally do not know shit. Now, I apologize if anyone felt that way. That was not my intention, as I include myself in the reading of that statement, right? I don't know shit, and the shit I don't know is even bigger than the shit I don't know, etc. However that meme goes, and it's really quite a humorous and delightful meme. It's quite adorable. I love it. I don't know why anyone shouldn't love that meme, because it really is quite funny, because it really is quite true. If you're honest, if you're truly, truly honest with yourself at an intellectual and spiritual level, you have to just admit that the scope of the universe is so broad that no matter how much you think you know, there's so much more that you don't even realize you don't know that you don't know, you know? I digress. I would like to drop this notion here in as before transitioning and playing a little bit of music for you. For proper context, it is worth noting to any new listener and any not so new listener that has yet to stumble into a particular set of episodes, that right here and right now, in this moment, in the way I'm trying to slide back into my daily or almost daily casting of this podcast, it would be useful and helpful for everyone involved if you were to connect to any and all of the various episodes in my content list entitled and or branded with the words warning and disclosure. There's a couple of different ones, but I've got a couple of specific ones that I saved the links to, which if I'm really clever, I'll remember to put up in the comments section at sprecher.com. You can listen to this podcast in a bunch of different platforms, not to get all self-promotional, but if you really want to get in on the hot debate, where I hope to start reading more comments, and it is a sad womp moment that we don't get a lot of comments on sprecher.com, but come on down, sign up, get your free profile so that you can pick your audience name, use the Facebook login if you got on that Facebook thing, and then participate. Even if you don't, if you're an avid listener and you have not listened to these 2 episodes, I humbly invite you to scroll down my list and find or go to the following link, www.sprecher.com user Mr. Zeppo /warnings -disclaimers -2020 -update. Warnings, Disclaimers 2020 Update. And there's also the episode entitled Warnings, Disclaimers Part 2. If your podcast catcher has a searchy widget and you can search for episodes, just try looking up those words. Warnings, disclaimers, and the 2020 update is the most recent one. I have not done a 2021 update to the warnings and disclaimers episode, but not that much in terms of what I might need to warning and disclaimer you has changed, I don't think. But I'll probably do some of that due diligence at some point in the not too crazy distant future. Having said that, folks, I want to move forward and say the following. There is a very important statement contained in those specific episodes above that I will restate here for the purposes of highlighting here and now for everyone, new and or long term. Oh, I'm repeating myself, but it's worth repeating myself because I swear people come at me for this. I completely realize and totally acknowledge to you right here and right now that I could be very wrong about anything and everything that I state in a declarative manner. And if I state it with confidence, it is merely because I have questioned it thoroughly enough and I have compared it to other things multiple times, and as of yet, nothing else has changed my mind away from the thing I have chosen to endorse as, this particular statement I am concluding is likely to be true. Warning. Please do not confuse my confidence in speaking and or writing with arrogance nor self-righteousness. Although it is quite easy to project onto someone, I realize it is quite the fine and delicate line between the two. And I, being a former theater major, and by that I mean I studied theater for quite a long time in the world of studying things at universities, and a theater professional. I worked in the industry in a professional level, although I never made it big and I wasn't some sort of famous household blah, blah, blah. I have performed here or there. And yes, I have some theatery snark and a bit of Shakespearean turn to my language. That does not instamatically mean that your assumptions that I'm a self-righteous prick are automatically true. I'm just a guy. I will bleed if you prick me, to butcher a Shakespeare reference and not say it at all like it goes in the play. As a friend of mine from the interwebs of social domain bubbles said recently, blood is only really good to you on the inside. So, I'm just another squishy, ambulatory, speaking meat sack of blood and bone made up of even smaller things that, should boggle the mind, quite frankly. And I have never, and this is truly, sincerely something that I think is important that we should all sort of come to terms in. I've never claimed to be better or more important or more correct than anyone else about a goddamn thing. And anyone accusing me of doing so is genuinely kind of just running on triggered reactionary projectionism instead of actually hearing me out. Because I'm the first to be like, okay, I get it. I could be totally wrong. But after having done X, Y, and Z, whatever that might be, regarding the issue or the context involved, I've come to the conclusions that, that Z, triple Z, and VW are the things that might be the solution. Whatever those variables, right? And that's the way I operate. And if I say it with confidence, it means I've questioned it. And I've thought about it. And I've thought about its opposite. And I've thought about its inverse opposite. And I've thought about it, and then I've not thought about it. And I've put it through its paces. I assure you, in as humble and sincere a tone as I can muster right now, amped up on coffee and tea, I am genuinely under zero delusions of being 100% dead certain, self-righteously right and monolithically correct about anything. In fact, there's a bunch of shit I know I'm wrong about, but I like it anyways. And I'll say it. I'm like, I get it. I'm wrong about this, but I wish it were this way. Right? And I don't go around pretending to be 100% dead certain, dead right about anything, with some obvious and comical exceptions. I'm 100% dead certain that I know myself better than most anybody especially on a first glance, 5-minute blush look at 4 of my posts. No offense. I don't say that to be belittling. That's just a statement of fact. Someone who's looked at 5 minutes worth of my content will know me to the extent that they're able to perceive versus project. And that's a variable that's unique to everybody, and I'm speaking in broadest generalist terms. I know myself better than that, and I don't go around pretending to know other people better than themselves. No offense. That shouldn't be offensive. That should be a relief that I'm acknowledging that I don't do that. So my confidence is truly simply that, and I am always in the spirit of updating my understanding through the analysis of new, valid, validatable, confirmable information. I'm always prepared to update my assessment of things. I was going to share a comedic example. I am dead certain that the universe is far more strange and magical and awe-inspiring than we generally give it credit for. That's where I'm going to go with dead certain on things, right? Oh, that's really... but I'm not going to pretend to be dead certain to know what is going on behind closed doors in a power structure that I have zero access to. I'm not going to pretend to know. I'm going to give my most well-informed guess. And I know that it's that. And I'm not pretending otherwise. So, I think we should openly, if we're going to have a public discourse, if we're going to build a community around this little endeavor that we call my podcast show, we should all just realize that about myself, about each other, and run with that, and not try to presume otherwise, because it tends to build up, confusion and potential resentment. And seriously, friends, I want to conjoin that with an and. Please, before I do play that music next, I want to assure you that no matter how directly and how bluntly I may express my opinion, at my baseline understanding of reality itself, and I do not say that lightly, at my baseline understanding of the very nature of reality, I always carry around with me the overt acknowledgement that I could be dead wrong, that I could be missing some critical, important piece of information that I just have not had the time or capacity to ingest and process. And I assure you, friends, that it has been my life's modus operandi to consider myself always responsible and accountable for questioning myself. And I mean at the very root of it. I question my senses. I question the thinking that I experience autonomously and automatically in my head. I question my very ideation. I question the root source of the imagery and the notions and the abstractions that percolate up from wherever the hell it is they percolate up from. I question the very conceptualizations deeply and profoundly, and I analyze them and I go, can I actually commit to saying that to someone else and look them in the eye as if we just met at some public event and they're expressing their opinion and they're going to take a moment to listen to me express mine. I make my best possible assessment and run with a admittedly ever-changing, ever-evolving, ever-updating, relativistic, non-monolithic, non-static thesis. And the very bleeding edge of this thesis is the seeking of and identifying of new, verifiable, confirmable, repeatable, evidence-based information and or knowledge, which challenges me to change my mind and update everything. And I don't just say that, right? Now, there's some... I will admit there is a caveat to this, dear friends, and then I will play you a bit of fresh, dope, robot-breaking beats. There are some buckets of, quote, data that I consider, because of their foundations, already, asked and answered. And that can be frustrating to people, because they will then calculate their own assessment of my choice of words and my choice of tack, my choice of tactics, my choice of direction in conversation, and they'll choose to give themselves permission to label me in a million different ways. I've been labeled, every derogatory label you can imagine has been thrown at me with daggers and with all kinds of social media shade. This ain't my first roller coaster. But this is a live to tape, remix live, deep thoughts, deep track. And let me explain something. When I say live to tape, it means that there was no room for error. That this isn't something I fiddled with in post forever until I got to sound just the way I wanted to. I'm sorry, DJ Zed. I keep forgetting, and sometimes I let the truth out, DJ Zed. You and I are one and the same! What an evil, horrible, maniacal... Insert evil, horrible, maniacal robot laughter here, which I cannot do without destroying my voice. Cosmic Electro Music Asset Package on the Remix Live digital production platform, recorded live to tape, deep thoughts and shallow comebacks. Cosmic Electro 101. Live to tape, experimental music production by an animatronic digital robot. We were talking about and recapping some of the thoughts from the last two-parter episode before I went on a little month-long summer hiatus. The two other big things that I rambled on incoherently about in those episodes, and yes, folks, I get it. Some days it is atrocious, and I apologize. Some days, though, it trips trippingly off the tongue as if I wrote it for the stage, and even I am a little bit surprised because I don't know where it comes from. But the two things I talked about worth discussing now, as DJ Zed winds up this bit-o music experience. The golden rule. Not as some imposition about how you should behave, but as a magical axiom of reality that you indeed are one and the same with everyone else. Not because God told you to treat them like your higher soul, but because everyone is a manifestation of one cosmic higher soul, one oversoul of humanity, bifurcating itself infinitely in a fractal gasmic process of emanation and literally manifesting the individuated experience that is you, is also them, is also everyone. That's what I meant when I rambled on incoherently about the golden rule. Not follow it because somebody so-and-so told you to, but find the spiritual inner work that allows you to directly phenomenologically confirm that your body avatar is a divine chariot, a seat, a chair, a puppet for this cosmic, universal, spiritual meta soul, this being beyond the scope of your individual small fractal life. Your one little life here is just an expression of the soul that is expressing all life. And the final thing over there from those two episodes that I realize I need to go back and like updraft and pick clean in post-production and or just totally replace with a better recording. And that's that not only is there an infinite universe of universes in an infinity of timelines, you are a macro-microverse yourself. Your individuality is individuality in part by function because your being houses an expression of an infinity of yourselves in a inverse golden spiral of all possible probability waveform functions of what your life can, could, should, would, might have had, is becoming, and that is not some just highfalutin yada yada theoretical that like sounds cool and makes for trippy visuals when you include it in action sequences for superhero movies, right? It is the metaphysics, the fractal ism, and I hate ism because I hesitate every time I walk up to that word and it sounds like I've got to use it because we need something else. We don't need an ism, like political ism. We don't need a religious ism. We don't need a spiritual ism. We don't need a new ism. But I digress, folks. So the implications of the fractal nature of reality splayed out with an L, fanned out unfold out before us in fascinating ways. And should not these are not ideas just to be oohed and awed and then dismissed. They are tangible, meaningful, esoteric understandings that might actually facilitate our own development and boost the well-being of everyone, if taken to their logical conclusions through a cumulative, collective community investigation that we have hitherto not quite endeavored in quite yet. Not to the levels and scale which I propose or imagine. But I digress. I was talking about verifiable, confirmable, repeatable, evidence-based information, right? And that I try to work that way. I try not to say crazy highfalutin things without having some of that stuff. Let me interject in a preemptive apology. Do I sometimes fail at this and all the other things that I talk about? But of course, dear friends, you betcha. But also, if I may be so bold, I challenge you to introduce me to someone other than Buddha, other than Yeshua, other than Krishna, someone that never has failed at one of or all of these things that we challenge ourselves with. And that's a humbling thing. And I don't throw that out there just as a cheeky, a spunky thing to say. It's a profound thing that should bring us into a deeper communion, as opposed to separate us apart with a wider wedge of treadmill of distraction. Forgive the extra self-meta commentary abstraction that is this particular triptych of episodes. The last two in this episode, friends, for anyone who's confused as to what the bloody hell I'm talking about and why I'm sort of just making declarative statements. This is all meta commentary about the nature and flow and function of my podcast and what I'm trying to do with it. So, brace yourselves. My story gets better. It's almost there. In terms of wrapping this episode up, I feel it is important to declare as a disclaimer the following. I have said this before on the episode, on various episodes, and I will very likely have to say it again. So please take note and bear witness. I have never, all caps, never, and I'm not angry about it, I'm just making sure it's very clear to people in their minds. I have never claimed to have achieved, quote, enlightenment, close quote, or, quote, awakening, close quote. And I'll say it again for emphasis. I have never claimed to have achieved enlightenment or awakening, despite the curious fact that people have, throughout my lifetime, awkwardly accused me of having done so all the time, and I don't get it. And as a matter of historical fact, I have never said I am enlightened. I literally, quote, I am enlightened, has never come out of my mouth in a meaningful way, other than to say it in a sentence like this, to assert to you that I have not claimed it. And yet people come at me after, a brief glance of some spiritual commentary of some sort on something they saw or read or heard 5 seconds of, and they're like, well, you're so special and you're so enlightened and you're so such. I'm like, nope, sorry, never claimed that. Don't know why you're throwing that mud at me. It's not helping your argument because you're wrong. Like, I just have not. I factually have never made that claim. In fact, I argue quite adamantly all the time that it is the height of hubris at this point in time and history to be claiming to be actually fully and completely enlightened. for a bunch of various technical reasons, some of which I went into great detail in the last episode, some of which I'll go into great detail in a future episode. But the key one being that unless you can deploy your 12th dimensional multi-chakra of many chakras chakra system with the fully functional Merkaba chariot of light, and you can instantly transmute your physical ambulatory meat sack made of blood and bone into pure living conscious light in order to teleport anywhere in the world, up to and including while I am live on the air here in my home studio / office where I can interview you. Unless you're at that level of mastery, and I get it, there may very well be some people or someone out there that technically, theoretically is. Do I know them? No. Have they ever turned up despite my persistent invitations? Not yet. If they were a pre-existing, already completed, fully awakened, enlightened master walking amongst us, wouldn't they be completely capable of just knowing that I was inviting them to show up, incorporeally and yet still, visible and tangible and hearable? I would venture, if all of that stuff were actually true, then yes, they would, and yes, they could, and yes, they should. And yet they don't. And I'm not judging anything about it, right? I'm not, that statement is not meant to cast aspersions at anyone. My point is that there are, and this is again, not a judgmental thing, it's just a statement of fact. There are a lot of people from all walks of life, from all kinds and types of settings and reasons for which I find that are saying, to some degree or another of taking themselves seriously, I am awakened, I am enlightened, and while I don't want to rain on anybody's parade, and I don't want to be a big poo-poo wet towel about it, if your statements are nuanced and self-aware and acknowledge that you're not the Buddha yet, and that you're not doing all those other things and transmuting into pure light, and that you mean something other, then cool. And I don't mean to sound snarky about it, but we need better language than that, because, it's just, I'm a word-ophile. I really want the words to be clearly used according to their meaning. To be enlightened means to have done the 12D chakra Merkaba deployment and transmuted the physical body avatar into whatever the next stage is, right? Which is often described as pure, living, conscious light. Don't get me wrong, I am not making the argument that such a thing is not possible, which is the other ridiculous thing that I get accused of totally incorrectly by people all the time. Different set of people. What I am saying and what I am doing is commenting on the concept and attempting to arrive at a working, potential, possible, as in feasible, working theoretical thesis. That it is an attempt at describing the means by which those things might or could be successfully pursued or investigated. As I put it quite directly, I am of the humble opinion that enlightenment, the actual, full and complete, as is described in, Matthew, blah, 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 I always get the numbers wrong. but the eyes are the light of the body. If thine eye be singular, then thy body shall be made up of light. I am of the opinion that kind of transformational, evolutionary change is indeed the birthright, not of some special individual necessarily, although there will be some special individual which will sort of like activate themselves quite likely, but of the whole species. For as many of the prior, mythologized and abused prophets commonly said, although people tend to ignore this because of all the distractionary things that get thrown into the mix, most all of the, beatific, special golden ones of history said some form of this kingdom, this power, this magic is within you. But we'll put a pin in that little note and stick it up to the giant corkboard to the left and up in the imaginary room in which we share when we have these prolonged discussions, dear friends. For we must come back to it. I need to zip through the rest of the things I'd planned for this episode or risk making it unbearably long. I believe, and I don't use that word very often for reasons I've already nerded out about on the show before. So there are very few things that I give my power of belief to, but I believe that as a society, all of us, all together, we ought to perhaps, just maybe, turn our collective attention to the investigation of such things in a hitherto in a way that we have hitherto not quite pursued them, right? In a serious way that arguably we've never been quite serious about this before. For the purposes of verifying, not in a dogmatic, ideologically driven, you must believe this because we talked you into believing it kind of way, but in, as I talked about before, in a phenomenological way. Verifying and potentially confirming and presuming that there's something to be found there, eventually manifesting such transformational and evolutionary changes in the human species as, getting up there to actually transmuting ourselves and becoming beings of pure light. Because clearly, call me crazy, you wouldn't be the first, if we were all beings of pure light, a lot of the political shenanigans and malarkey that is simultaneously absurd and meaningless but also damaging to people in real terms wouldn't even be entertained by anyone. Or so it would seem. Having said that, friends, I want to assure to you, by way of meta commentary, that I am in no way attempting to mislead, deceive, nor bullshit anyone with what I say. I am not here to argue. I am not here to coerce anyone into blind-faithedly agreeing and getting into lockstep and goose-step with me. I'm here to discuss and debate, to share and compare. I'm here to compare and contrast, to say, hey, I think this, and maybe also a little bit of this. What do you guys think? I am here to ask real questions. I don't ask malarkey questions that don't go anywhere and that are only designed to confuse or muddy the waters or coerce people into buying into a preconceived notion or a packaged set of talking points. I ask the real questions in pursuit of real answers. I share the observations I have made, Not over the last 7 minutes, but over a lifetime of making impartial observations. And whether you think it's possible or not, I have literally been this kind of analytical creature of the mind since Ronald Reagan was in office. So if you think you've got some hot burning break the presses news about what's going on in the world, slow your roll. I've probably heard it. Or some previous variation on it. No offense. I'm not being a jerk. I'm letting you know that you don't have to update me that the Federal Reserve is neither a part of government nor actually in, holding gold in reserve. Like, all the things. I've heard them before. Most of them. There's probably a few out there that I haven't, because I, dear friends, try to avoid working in absolutes. So I try to avoid making broad, monolithic, absolutist statements. When I make social commentary, I am always attempting to speak in the most impersonal and theoretical terms. I say this, friends, because I find that a lot of people take my commentary really, really personally. And they're out there on a hair trigger, friends. And if I say something's a bit of malarkey, they think I've told them that they are evil, malicious liars, which I have not. I've said that idea as I see you presenting it. I don't know if you think that's a personal idea you invented or if that's just something you're retweeting, but that idea seems to be comprised of malarkey. Totally different thing, right? To say, I don't think this idea works, or to say, you're a stupid doo-doo poo-poo head. I don't run in with a flaming bag of poop excrement, of mental excrement, and throw it at your doorstep. I ask you questions and make observations that I think, if you step outside of boxes that people sometimes don't want to, stand up, right? One of those boxes is political ideology is a treadmill of distraction. If you're going to come at me with you're wrong because this political ideology that I believe in is right, I'm going to go, okay, cool, but have you stopped to consider that all political ideology is a treadmill of distraction, generating conflict, designed to make you argue with your fellow human being over political ideology about how to be a human being instead of being a good human being. And here's where I get cuckoo crazy, friends. Here's where I go flying past at light speed beyond that which whatever new age thing is new agey, and go away somewhere crazy. There just might be, take a deep breath and follow me here, because I'm going way out there, folks. I'm out on a limb. There just might be some things that humanity as a species, as a living organism on this living womb that is trying to give birth to all living organisms, there just might be some activities that the human species is supposed to be doing, not because I say so, not because some made-up imaginary cartoon figure of a thing we call God says so, but because it is necessary for the universe to do the things that it needs to do, because it is a living thing, and it has things to do. And we are, like leaves on a tree, or probiotic bacteria in the appendix. We are just little tiny things that are part of a bigger thing that's part of a bigger thing that's part of a bigger thing. Crazy, I know, right? And political ideology is by definition, by form, and by function, a treadmill of distraction. From what? From other distractions, which are a treadmill of distraction from what? And it loops around for a bit there, but ultimately is distracting us from these things that I dare suggest to you, friends, these activities, these jobs, this spiritual work that we can, could, should, would, might very well, ought to be doing, and kind of aren't, most of us, at all. Hardly. Except for the most profoundly inspired and delightfully, invested in their spiritual jams. And that even they, for this is attendant at the center of my whole worldview. There is no one so spiritually advanced that they cannot do more spiritual work here and now that will benefit themselves, their own healing, and that of the human species. Put a pin in that sentence. You got to unpack that. But I digress. Where was I? When I make... have I already said this? I do have some notes from before. Like I said, this show is real, raw, and radically unscripted. But I do, for the purposes of trying to contain the madness, make myself some notes and, have some things I've drafted up. I am never, when I say things, I'm never trying to take it to a personal attack place. Although sometimes I fail, right? But it is important for me to posit that I'm speaking in the broadest terms possible based on a wide range of experiences and observations, and that is the level of public discourse I invite everyone to participate, and that we need to do that more all together. And we're coming around the bend, folks, almost there, towards the end of the thoughts I had collected for today's episodes. Within the framework, if I may tell you, within the framework of my worldview and my meta-thesis about what we may jokingly say is, quote, what the fuck is actually going on here, which I'm working on, and which I am always open to amending and updating with new ingredients, which I have not been laboring on just recently, but have been delving into deeply for the vast majority of my thinking life. Within that framework, I do indeed take the liberty of taking certain things for granted, quote unquote, as in they are operational assumptions, like up is intrinsically inseparable from down. That I don't like axiomatic truths, but there are some things that are so real in the universe that have been so clearly vetted and that can be so easily tested once more, and that very, very unlikely to be broken. For example, no matter how specifically you want to only go up, down is always immediately down from up. Left is immediately left from right, right? And that these things are inseparable from each other, right? And that they are very real, and that you want to call them absolute, but they are actually very relative to the being which is observing the directionality. And that you cannot separate that from the universe. The universe intrinsically contains that, and it's an operational assumption. Right? Okay. Why did I point that out? Because there's an aggressive effort to try to undermine these operational assumptions. And I have a collection of my own that I take as not for granted in the dismissive way, in the rude, chauvinist cliche of a wife-beating, horrible narcissist of a man kind of way, to go to a terrible place of comedy, and come stumbling back from that going, why did I go there? But in a discerning way. Is the distinction clear? Because those are two different ways to use that word. Taking certain things for granted, as in that they are understood, they have been acknowledged, they don't need to be argued or relitigated. That's what I mean. That they are operational, and that's the way in which I'm using the term taking things for granted, or accepting things as taken for granted. As in to say that the idea is understood to be at play, and generally speaking, by default, whether or not it is overtly called out. And that I'm not really interested in arguing and relitigating. And those things, I think, are valid. But always welcome the questioning of. I'm just not going to go into some crazy argumentation over, right? Because, yes, question everything. I put these things there because I think I've questioned them enough to realize that they can be easily confirmed. That's why I take them for granted. They are granted. Go confirm them for yourself instead of arguing with me, right? If you hold your breath long enough, you'll really need to take a breath and it'll hurt. If someone forces you not to breathe, you'll pass out. That's functional reality in life. There are things like that that are really, really big and not as obvious. And we have fun exploring them on this show. So I just need to identify that that's one of the ways in which I work. I have never and will never demand that anyone just blind faith agree with me. All opinions, assertions, declarative statements, theories, suggestions, ideas, etc. are genuinely my own, and no one, no person, nor entity, nor corporate system of any kind other than the audience itself and the monetization of the product itself is paying me to say what I say. And I assure you, friends, no one is coercing me to say the things I say. It troubles me that I've noticed that in a tangible way that there's a misconception that seems to be floating around out there in amongst some people that are not super familiar with the show but are aware that my show is what I'm working around on the various social media platforms, and it appears that there's this presumption that this is a big budget, big production deal. It's just me, folks. There is no graphics department. There is no legal department. There is no booking department. It's just me. I make the graphics. I come up with the talking points based on all the things that I'm shared with you, et cetera, et cetera. And no matter how much people derisively say, yeah, right, dude, you're just a shill for the blah, 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 insert here, whatever they're fucking going on about. It's just me. And yes, I'm monetizing the show. And yes, I'm trying to see if this is something that goes viral and picks up and that lots of people listen to, because the system has tried to shank me hard. And so I'm trying to jump on one of the bouncy platforms of supposedly, democratizing the internet so you can bootstrap yourself into success. Let's have some of it, folks. And your helpful listening is totally a part of that community building process, folks. So I thank you, dear listeners, quite sincerely. And as a sort of rounding the corner and getting into the final bit of disclosures and statements about the show, yes, here's one that's very important. Yes, I realize just how, quote, batshit crazy, close quote, some of this may sound. If you calling me crazy is your best and first and earliest response to my show, LOL out loud, you ain't the first, you won't be the last, it's no skin off my teeth, it's no blood drawn, it's no nothing. It means zero to me if that's what you gotta do. It's like bugs on a windshield while driving through the grapevine on a sweltering summer evening. Thanks for playing. Next. Oh, you said that too? Great. Moving on. But hey, it's your perfect right. I'm not saying don't do it. Call me crazy. Post the comment on the Facebook page. It helps my analytics. Go to Spreaker.com and say, dude, you crazy. But don't do that and then refuse to listen to the show and be unable to explain to me why I'm crazy. Because then you just look like someone with a hammer that only has, belittling and putting other people down as their only mental tool. That's not a good look. I know, I'm a cuckoo nut job, new age weirdo talking about probability waveform functions and fractals and Terence McKenna. But trust me, there's a method to my madness, and there's a point that I'm trying to point you in the direction of. Having said all that, dear friends, I want to close with this. Namaste. And when I say it, I effing mean it. Right? The light that is the consciousness within my phenomenological experience acknowledges the light that is the consciousness within your own. Not because someone told me to believe that, but because phenomenologically, I can no longer deny that that is the reality, that that is the case. And that understanding that, we can ultimately transcend any crazy, programmatic, ideologically driven discernment problem or judgment problem or disagreement problem. If we are to have a successful conversation, friends, in my humble opinion, we must all be aware of the fact, recognized openly, that we, as individuals and as a collective, are not monoliths. You are not a monolith. I am not a monolith. Calling me a monolith of stupidity will not prove your point, no matter how vicious it may sound when you drop that mic, because no one is. Am I a bumbling moron? Of course I have been. Have you not? I ask you quite humbly. I literally am a person who has professionally been paid to put on clown makeup and make people laugh. Do you think that has led me to a deeper understanding or a complete lack of understanding that we are all flawed human beings? I wonder. I tell you, it has led me to a deeper understanding. No matter how much you may giggle that I once was paid professionally to be a performing theater clown in the international physical theater circuit, we are relativistic and subjective beings, each and every one of us. No one is so righteously pure that they cannot use a little bit of humility. No one is so humble that they cannot, work a little harder on that humble pie. We'll talk more of that in a future nugget of Zen episode. Tune in to today's Nugget of Zen for the really tight Zen-like moments of deep, profound thoughts. No matter what anyone thinks or believes, dear friends, we are all deeply subjective and relativistic creatures at the mercy of the flaws of our own minds, inherent urge to edit and updraft, and ultimately tango a little too hard with hubris. We are all guilty of remixing our own memories of our own memories. So let's not go pretending to be absolutely righteous about what we did or did not do, and what others did or did not do. What do we gain by that anyways? The slippery slope of uncertainty is an actual inherent aspect of the way our recall apparatus functions in this mysterious, lucid drifting of details in conscious and semi-unconscious and often irrational ways. We got to own up to that, and we've got to strive for sincerity in going, oh, you're right, I didn't really quite say that. Or if I said it, I didn't emphasize it enough, or whatever, and that just isn't in terms of how we remember. It's in terms of how things are in reality. I see a lot of claims. This object or label or collective of people, insert your favorite whatever the fuck here, is absolute, insert whatever the fuck judgmental thing you're going to want to put here. When they aren't, right? I'll put it to you this way. It's really quite interesting and curious that a lot of the same people that were adamantly arguing and fighting back and saying things like, it is wrong and unfair to say that all white people are racist, which it is. White people are not a monolith of racism. But some of those same people are now most certainly explicitly saying absolutist, monolithic things about science. All science is an evil Satanist cult of blah, blah, blah. Okay. Are you going to pick a lane there? Are we going to build a better, more nuanced threading of that absurdity needle? Because you can't have it both ways. I digress. Speaking of which, I guess we have to have it both ways, right? Because no one is perfect. In a recent episode, I am sad to say, I totally failed to live up to my own rules of discourse. And while it was quite momentary, I momentarily commented on a particular on-air media personality and used a playground insult. And I have to own up to things, right? And I think I caught myself in the moment. But I want to publicly apologize now to them, to you, dear audience, and generally to the universe at large for that momentary failing. And I'll admit now, if I didn't then, I certainly had the thought, as I caught myself, that person is not stupid. I used the word stupid, and then I instantly said, you know what, no, I'm sorry, they're not stupid. And then I called them a fool, because I do believe they are. I don't know why they chose the path they have chosen, and that they continue to choose and to double down on. But the person I was discussing clearly has chosen to use an enviable and powerful platform of public discourse to spew so much malarkey, so much nonsense, so many verifiable, confirmable statements that are untrue, that in court multiple times they have been admonished as being nothing but entertainment of exaggeration. And they themselves have had to say, in terms of legal defense, that no intelligent person in their right mind would take their own commentary seriously. But you know what? They're not stupid. They're doing it on purpose. And they know that they're doing it. And they're doing it on purpose for a reason. And that frustrates the bejesus out of me. And that's why the lapse in standing up to my own, as brief as it was, as laughable as it was, because I immediately said, you know what, okay, he's not stupid. But there it is, folks. Okay? And I know, I completely understand, I run the risk of coming off the wrong way right here and right now. In attempting to redress my own poor choice of wording in a past episode, I can see how easily I may be accused of virtue signaling and all that sort of thing. But I'm genuinely apologizing, right? I ask those who come to the table, let's be real, let's be blunt, let's use some salty language and not get prissy about it. We can say frickety frickety frack, but let's not say horrible, evil, belittling things that lean towards intimidating and or threatening, right? Because that's nonsense, and there's a certain threshold upon which it becomes a violation of moral, ethical, and legal standards, right? And I'm not about that. Not that I'm a blind faith bootlicking, gotta follow all the rules either, because I'm not, dear friends. But there are plenty of basic fundamental laws that I'm quite in favor of, such as, and I'm not being facetious when I say this, I'm a big fan of thou shalt not kill. Why did I just drop that level of a tonality and reference right now? Why did I just get all biblical on my podcast audience? Oh, woe is me. Let's be really honest here, folks, right? Like, we all suck at being good humans. I'm not frivolously saying that. I have failed to be a good human. And if you're intellectually honest with me, you have also. We can get, all hardcore about it like Chunk does in Goonies and go way back to our earliest most primal sins from childhood. We don't need to. It would make this show way too long, and it's already at 84 minutes, 59 seconds. Oh my gosh. I'm going to go back and do an impromptu post-production edit and break this episode up into 2 parts. That doesn't mean I'm going to come back and do a second part now. When I end this show, I'm going to let it sit for a day. And then after that, I'm going to take it down. I'm going to break it up into 2 chunks. And I'm going to put it back up. But I digress. I made my apologies. I know that, I could sound like a fool. But we all can. And we have this in common. And if we... As I want to genuinely connect. Doesn't everyone long for that? Even people most diametrically opposed in political or ideological opinion, we all genuinely long for connection. And therein is the ego trap of longing for connection so much that you sort of fall into blindly demanding that people blindly agree with you. Or take it as insult. I don't do that. I happily let people live their lives believing whatever nonsense they want to believe. If you want to believe that the world is flat and that there's a waterfall off which you might fall, great. If I ever make a bunch of money, which I have not yet, dear folks, but the more you listen to the show, the more the likelihood of that happening goes up. If I ever suddenly strike it rich, I will invite my favoriteest flat earthers. Let's go get a yacht and find that effing waterfall. Because I believe in your right to believe in whatever you want. Am I going to agree with you if I don't believe the same? No. And I'm not going to care what you think or how that makes you feel if I cannot agree with you. I cannot agree with certain things in a way that's very, very serious. And I'll just leave with you some in case you aren't aware. I cannot agree that Donald Trump is the savior of the world. I can't. It's intellectually repugnant to me, and I don't mean to be rude about it. It's just too obvious based on his actual, real-life, verifiable, undeniable court records. Never mind the shit that comes out of his mouth. Because he talks mad shit. And he does. And I'm not saying that to belittle him. That's a hard, cold, stone, undeniable fact. Some people love that about him. I do not value it. I try not to talk mad shit. I try to talk real things. And the things that he wants to make people believe have a long history of turning out to not be very real. And I'm not just blindly accusing him of that. I have a 5-year-long podcast track record of calling him out on all the things that were baloney. I can't even begin to say they were all. My show is the Cliff Notes. This is me trying to keep up with the amount of crazy things that are obviously, verifiably not true. There's a thing I need to reference, and I need to pull it up. I don't remember to get the wording right. It's a thing I wrote, so I'm not reading off a teleprompter, folks. I'm giving you my deepest, serious thoughts, and I just got to find where I got them written down. And I'm scrambling because I didn't think to pull this up earlier because it wasn't exactly something I thought I'd get around to reading. But here we are. Here we are nonetheless. As soon as it finishes loading, give me a second. There is, dear friends, I want you to take a moment to join me in contemplating this. There is a huge difference between the act of knee-jerkedly, automatically, autonomously dismissing anything and everything as fake news. I know it's a wordy sentence, right? But I'm drawing a line. There's a big difference between just saying everything is fake news. Anything I disagree with is fake news. I don't want to think about that, so it's fake news. And so there's a huge difference between all of that, and dare I say that's over there on the malarkey side of the fence, for reasons I've explained before, and I'll gladly explain again, like Ricky Ricardo coming home and asking Lucy to explain some things. Sorry for the random interjection. There is a huge difference between blindly rejecting anything and everything as fake news and making the factual discernment and declarative statement that something is truly, categorically, demonstrably false. And that, my friends, is not just word play. Words effing matter. They also totally don't, and we need to be letting them go and abdicating them, because it's why we get butthurt and argue and fight instead of unite and heal. But those two things coexist as true simultaneously as once at all times. Words effing matter, and they are also precisely one of the things we need to transcend. So, having said all that, let us remind ourselves that we are frail, relativistic creatures with opinions. None of us, especially any of us that do not have a big-time budget to hire people, to have a research department and a writing team, none of us are know-it-all, genius-level experts about anything in particular, I don't think. Unless, plenty of people out there have got master's degrees and blah, 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 and that's great, and I respect that. But there's also, as the pie chart quite humorously points out, plenty of shit we don't know about. So, if that is the case, let's remember and remind each other that, the best course of action is to let ye who is without sin cast the first stone. Am I right? And we all get frustrated. We all get worked up to the point of potentially snapping and reaching for the easy jab, reaching for the petty insult, reaching for the heavy-ass rock to bitch smack you upside the head like Cain bashed Abel. And guess what, folks? Here's a central pillar of my show. Maybe, just maybe, that is something that the system wants. What is the system? The system of oppression. Which system of oppression? The system of oppression that is centuries old, that y'all are waving your flags and ringing your bells about. The system of oppression that you think dear old Donald Trump is fighting against, which I don't really think is. I think he's a puppet with a puppet master. I think he's complicit and he's playing a part. That system of oppression creates a million different ways to distract us and to engage us in treadmills of conflict. Right? In which the central activity is literally getting Americans to hate Americans, insert your country here, to hate your fellow countrymen, insert the name of your fellow countrymen here, over ideology that is riddled with neuro-linguistic programming about us versus them and I am better than them kind of programming. That's the agenda, and it's clearly happening because all I see to the ability that I have to perceive American culture, it is riddled with Americans jokingly hating on, actually hating on, and trending towards violence their fellow Americans over what? Nowadays, mostly ideological disagreements and arguments over ideological constructs about how to properly be, in the most self-righteous ways, a good American. And that's an absurd thing to get caught up in, I think. And that's exactly, no matter how you slice Trump up, that's perceptually the core of his political modality. Therefore, I can't get behind it, right? philosophically, as we come around the final bend, I am personally of the conviction that there is now in this material world, no one that is so morally superior that they deserve to be idolized, right? There is no one so spiritually advanced that they don't have more spiritual work to do, and that should be poo-pooing in other people's throats judgment and oppressive malarkey. And yet we find ourselves increasingly agitated in a socio-political environment, a gestalt, as I pointed out in the past episode, a gestalt that has architectural ingredients at play, some of which add up to a left versus right echo chamber psyop double reverse pincer maneuver of oppression and manipulation, right? As I've said before, the political gestalt we currently find ourselves in is the direct result of a double echo chamber psyop pincer maneuver that's been ongoing since Reagan was in office and arguably centuries before, not just, curiously, the last 40 years. And this includes the utilization of pasty-faced, orange spray-tanned puppets claiming to be the only person capable of fixing it all for the purposes of pushing towards one extreme or the other the world and its ideological trends. Now, we can get off on all kinds of crazy tangents, but I've been rambling for ages, and this episode is already way too long. So I want to casually reference here the fractal nature of reality, right? I've talked about it before. I'll talk about it again. Why is it important? Because the puppet masters, as I got into a conversation not too long ago, the puppet masters aren't what we should be focusing on, right? If there are puppet masters, which I argue there probably are, they aren't the people that we're being served up to on a silver platter with pictures and names and it's a little too obvious. And ultimately, it doesn't matter because they probably have puppet masters hiding in the shadows behind them. And if reality is truly fractal in nature, which I posit to you, dear friends, I could be wrong, but I really, really, really think after a certain set of lifetimes worth of questioning and contemplating this and comparing and contrasting against other theories, I think it is truly, in the most profoundest ways, fractal in nature. I think reality is an infinitely diverse, unfolding, fractal algorithm of all probable outcomes being made manifest through the process of divine manifestation. As in, creation wasn't some long ago thing that happened and is now complete and done, as I've pointed out to you before, dear friends, but an ever-flowing, ever-frothing, ever-fucking happening fractal unfolding that's perpetually happening here and now. And that's important. More important than the dichotomous never-ending argument about which one is most righteous, left or right. Because one is an unsolvable political ideological puzzle that leads to nothing besides more unsolvable political ideological puzzles, which are engineered to create conflict. Why? Because some people profiteer on conflict, and that's enough reason. Why perpetuate that when we can be investigating all of the other dynamic things going on, right? That are implied from or through or that we can come to understand through the lens of a fractal understanding of the functional nature of reality and how that applies to ego traps and ego systems and hubris and our own self-destructive, self-undermining through these system of oppressions. Because as we finally come full circle at 100 minutes and 10 seconds, forgive me, folks, I guess I had a lot to say today. As we come full circle, not because Inner Worlds told me to say that, they didn't, right? They came along and said something in a beautiful way that I had been, feeling and thinking and seeing in reality and going, boom, I like the way they express it even better than the way I had put it before. So I'm going to run with their expression, and that's this. I'll leave this for you, friends. The rest of the opening blurb from Inner Worlds, Outer Worlds, and I quote, "The true crisis in our world, it's not social, political, or economic. Our crisis is a crisis of consciousness, an inability to directly experience our own true nature, an inability to recognize this same nature in everyone and in all things. Realizing that there is only one divine consciousness, it becomes clear that to awaken one's true self, one must awaken all beings. There are innumerable sentient beings in the universe. I vow to help them all to awaken. My personal, individual imperfections are inexhaustible, and yet I vow to overcome them all. The Dharma is unknowable, and yet I shall vow to know it. The way of awakening is unattainable. I vow to attain it." Not because it's some pretty feather I'm going to put in my cap, but because, dear friends and listeners, and this is the critical key at the center of the whole puzzle, if we can heal ourselves, and we can heal each other, and we can heal the entire species, we can heal all those we have labeled bad guys. Instead of doing the absolutely absurdly ridiculous thing that most of us have previously in past lives insisted on doing, which is lower ourselves, stoop ourselves to becoming bad guys vis-a-vis the venom and violence of vengeance, right? Why should we allow ourselves to make ourselves become murderers in the act of murdering murderers as a means to punish them for their act of murdering, which only renders us murderers? Why should we do that, right? Justice is one thing, but becoming a self-appointed assassin is something else. And justice, dear friends, in a metaphysical world includes, dare I say it, healing. the spiritual warfare that everyone's so concerned about is precisely about whether or not the human species collectively aligns itself intradimensionally, multidimensionally to its multifaceted inner self and its collective spiritual multifaceted self externally. That's what they're distracting us from. That's what the war is about. And by jumping in with emotional, intellectual, spiritual, and physical violence to fight that war, we keep ourselves neglecting, we keep ourselves in the act of being distracted from, we keep ourselves busy butchering each other instead of healing each other, which is the solution to the spiritual warfare. That's the solution, folks. It isn't to go chasing with hubris the warfare they're fear-mongering you about, but to turn inwards and relinquish that through healing for the purposes of absolving the trauma at the root cause of all the socio-spiritual, psychokinetic ills and pains and disease and, oh, that wasn't the loop I wanted to play. But anyways, you get my drift. As always, friends, may peace, love, and grooviness blossom in your hearts. Namaste, and thank you for listening.